Will this be Rutgers' best recruiting class in 2025 since that 2012 class? Big news, Rutgers' long and winding road is over. We get an AD finally. And will Donald Trump save amateur athletics? Let's get to it. Okay, long time no see. Kind of a slow time of the year for Rutgers athletics, but I love this time of the year because training camp will start. We start to wind down the summer. You get your last beach time in. Those pumpkin ales and Oktoberfests come in. I always look forward to that. And the start of football season. And we got some big news just first. As I said in the introduction, will this be Rutgers' best recruiting class in since 2012? I kind of think this class, and I've talked about this in the past, I think it has a little more depth. Nonetheless, Wydeek Collier will be our highest ranked recruit in the 2025 class as he reclassifies from 2026. He's going to be, what was he, in the 300s, 400s somewhere now, will be number 91, 92, a top 100 pick. He is a long athletic freak, just needs to put on a few LBs. He apparently, according to 247, is the 8th highest ranked prospect to sign with us in the modern recruiting era. So this is kind of a smart thing. Mike and Richie from the Night Report reported on this, how you can ward off the sharks from chasing after him. Because if you have to go through the whole 2025 season, you give other programs opportunities to pull for him. Props to Demir Shore, fellow Philadelphia native. Pennsylvania guys putting in work. So Mike from the Night Report probably loves that. Demir was the one instrumental in getting Wydeek to come to Rutgers. Nonetheless, a lot of people say, Mike and Richie were talking about this a little bit yesterday, and they were talking about, the playing time's not going to be there anyway. Maybe he gets a couple. Don't be shocked. Yes, Eric O'Neill is there. Yes, Bradley Weaver is there. He'll be moving on next year. And Jordan Walker and Jordan Thompson, they've kind of flashed. They've had their moments. But a guy with Wydeek's skill set, don't be shocked if he gets a fair amount of reps. Now, I know Shiano likes to be, and staff like to be a little conservative. I'm not going to overplay their hand, but if he can be a playmaker on defense, don't be surprised if you see Wydeek getting a fair amount of reps. And, it's a Rutgers thing with the injuries, so you never know what's going to happen on that front. All right, let's get to it. Well, finally, after fumbling for over a year, when other programs are getting a job done, hiring their candidates, we finally get an athletic director in Kelli Zinn from LSU. This was lately, a lot of people, fans of the program, guys that cover the program, becoming even more frustrated, not just at the length of time it took us to get here, but, Rutgers is going to Rutgers. We were going to have a pioneering hire by a, turnkey who's out of, Haddonfield? Haddonfield, great place, South Jersey, outside Philly. Their CON, Len Perna, said their approach was going to, be a pioneering hire. And, I've said this, I don't know, maybe a couple videos ago. Don't try and reinvent the wheel here. It's Rutgers. Yes, it sounds flashy. It sounds cool. You want to be on the forefront of that kind of thing, hiring a business manager, revenue generator as your athletic director. But can we please get somebody that understands big time Power Four conference college athletics as a foundation to get us, being a good athletic program. That being said, that stalled out after Brian Lafemina, and I don't know, I guess Amy Towers fell in love with the guy. Rutgers swimmer for a year, but he was involved in a lot of, in the business world, transactions, had a lot of relationships, yada, 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 yada. I didn't necessarily, wasn't real excited about that, but it falls through. Rutgers is going to Rutgers. It fell through, and maybe this is not a bad thing now. Consultants spending money and dragging things out can't replace a decisive leader. The speculation was that William Tate, this was a sign, getting rid of turnkey was a sign that William Tate was taking the lead, and it didn't take him long. And, initially I had some concerns about an LSU president. I wasn't looking for an athletic director as president. But a common sense, decisive leader makes all the difference in the world, and it didn't take him very, very long. Leadership matters. We'll talk about more of that towards the latter part of this video. Nonetheless, William Tate brings on Kelli Zinn, who was an assistant AD at LSU. And we talked about this a little bit, and I think it was Richie from the Night Report also said this. Can we just pilfer somebody from the Big Ten or the SEC to run our athletic department? In my view, was just go out and hire a fundraiser, revenue generator, business manager who counts the dollars coming in and going out. So I like this. Kelli, who is Kelli Zinn? She kind of balances that athletic director and revenue development part. We'll get to that in a second. She's a 2002 graduate of West Virginia. She returned to West Virginia in 2010 as the assistant athletics director for compliance and governance. She was promoted to executive senior athletics director in 2014. Eventually, the interim AD a year later. She also has Big Ten experience. She served as Maryland's assistant AD from 2005 to 2010. She was a compliance assistant in the Big East in 2003 and 2004. So she checks all the boxes. Big East, Big Ten, which Rutgers was part of, and SEC boxes. She had been considered for the Georgia Tech job. She did not get the Georgia Tech job. Nonetheless, some chatter about her, trailblazing. We went through that with Julie Herman, assistant AD at Louisville for 16 years. She was one of 3 female ADs at the time, and then her lifestyle and all that stuff. I don't care about the trailblazing part of the hire. It's New Jersey. It's Rutgers. Just win. Go out there and build a program that can compete and that brings some excitement to the fan base. And William Tate seems to have faith in her. We'll see how that goes. At LSU, she supervised all 21 varsity programs, direct oversight of football and gymnastics. I know LSU fans, maybe they're not really happy with Chip Kelly. But they're averaging about 10 wins per season, even though, how ironic is it that your fans are complaining when you average almost 10 wins per year? Nonetheless, she oversaw revenue generation, and she apparently had some relationships, local businessmen. She was kind of that person that was responsible for revenue generation, capital projects, and that's a big thing for me, not just revamping the program, but we have some work to do with capital projects, strategic initiatives, as I talked about. LSU, while she was there, I think 3 years, 3 national championships, baseball, gymnastics, and women's basketball. 3 SEC championships in gymnastics, women's track. 20 of the 21 varsity teams reached postseason competition. They placed in the Directors' Cup, in the top 10 for the first time since 2008, 2009. Football is 129 games. They had and of course they had Jaden Daniels drafted last year. Nonetheless, how much of that is attributed to her? Not really sure, but she was apparently very instrumental in generating NIL revenue. So if you're looking for someone that could lead a department while being on the cusp of the new world of college, professional college athletics and generating NIL revenue, apparently she does that. But, as Politi said, she actually negotiated LSU's media rights partnerships, and all her bio said, well, she drove a 21% increase in revenue, and that's going to be a big thing for the Rutgers program and people who watch it. Oh, we can't be in the dark days of amateur athletics. We have to learn how to drive revenue. So apparently she was a significant force in that. But as Politi said, it's an understatement to say she's got her work cut out for her. She's in the New York, New Jersey / Philly marketplace. This is my view. You got to compete as a professional team, which a lot of those, SC teams do, because that's their de facto professional team. Nonetheless, Politi says she's got to increase revenue streams, develop better facilities, and figure out what to do with our programs and our teams that don't do well and their coaches, and re-energizing a fan base. We're consistently have these high hopes and we're beaten down, as we saw with the recent men's basketball season 15 and 17. And Politi talks about, nonetheless, LSU can compete with Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia. Are we going to be able to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State? Big ask. Like I said, she will likely be judged in how well she operates and moves in the new world of NIL, generating NIL revenue, which leads to my next segment, where we wish her luck. We certainly can use a boost, and hopefully between Tate and Kelli Zinn, we can get there. If they stabilize it and do a good enough job and get us to compete, I think that's a win. Can we just beat somebody in the top half of the Big Ten for once in football, and maybe get to the tournament in basketball? We'll see how that shakes out. Nonetheless, a lot of people will be looking at how we compete for athletes with revenue sharing and NIL, which leads to my next segment. Will Donald Trump make college athletics great again? You might have seen, maybe you didn't see, Donald Trump signs an executive order titled Save College Sports. And, if you've seen my videos on this, I'm not going to go on an extended rant, but college athletics is not professional athletics. They're amateur athletics. They're nonprofit organizations like nonprofits. The administrators are the ones responsible. They're the ones that make the money, and then they're responsible for revenue generation. And they mostly work on volunteers. But that being said, the Trump's executive order titled Save College Sports, and I love the idea of it. Not sure if it goes far enough or how it's going to compete with the recent legislation and the legal challenges going on. Number one, it bans pay-for-play NIL deals from third-party collectors or boosters that aren't tied to fair market value. Yes, no more paying athletes under the sham of collectives distributing revenue to play. You know, in politics, they call it dark money. You know, you get money from billionaires, third parties, that are directly paying your campaign or your college athlete. This wants to ban that, and I say kudos to that. To me, name, image, and likeness is, oh, you get your picture taken, you know, you sign the photograph, you want to sell it, okay, I got no problem with that. But going out and getting billionaires to generate to your program so you can pay amateur athletes like they're professional athletes, to me, is just insidious. And then what about the rebates to the taxpayers that have paid for the university and university athletic? You know, they're going back and they're back paying athletes. How about the taxpayers? Nonetheless, name, image, and likeness in my world needs to be serious tweaks. There are some tweaks here. Not sure how it's going to flush out, but it's a start. It clarifies, the order also clarifies amateur status. They want the Department of Labor and National Relations Board to recognize athletes as students, not employees. You think? I remember people that were lobbying for paying athletes several years ago, like, well, you know, they're employed. They're not employees. These guys are doing for the college what they used to do in their neighborhood, and we always used to do in our neighborhood. They'd play the game for free. The university is a marketing program that invests a lot of money into them like a racehorse to get them ready for college, for professional athletics or life. Establishing the relationships that they'll carry with them, whether for business, academics, professional athletics. The administration seeks a collective bargaining type agreement that you might see with professional athletic player unions. So that was the second thing. The order also, now this might be a little tougher, provide evidence that of fair market value. So if you're Alabama and you want to go out and do a Deshaun Watson deal and overpay somebody because the quarterback is the number one or number two rated quarterback in the class, and you can afford to overpay, who and how do they decide, what's fair market value? So the White House has said that the order wouldn't apply to legitimate fair market value for a player that it's not going to include brand endorsement. So if you want to endorse a brand and it's going to pay X amount of dollars, that wouldn't apply to that. The other thing, fourth thing that the order does, it protects by Title IX. That's something you have to think about. It protects non-revenue generating sports, the Olympic sports, requires efforts to preserve scholarships and participation in women's and Olympic sports. We saw this at Rutgers several years back, the controversy about having to cut Olympic sports because of budget restraints. And these sports are important. People who play lacrosse, our rowing teams are good. Baseball had a little bit of a run a couple years ago. Golf. We've had some golf. Wrestling. All these sports they bring traditional student athletes Soccer, they bring good student athletes that act as a pathway to the Olympics, and it helps contribute significantly to the university's total student athlete experience, if not being revenue generators. Football and men's basketball and football are going to be the revenue generators. It's the way it is. It happens everywhere. So I'm not against football and basketball generating the revenue, and then the university deciding how they're going to distribute the revenue amongst the rest of the programs. We'll get to more of that in a second. So what does the order actually do, at least in theory? Within 30 days, federal departments, including Education, Labor, Health and Human Services, and the FTC, must provide enforcement mechanisms. This includes Title IX compliance, state regulation, and federal funding. I kind of like this because now the federal funding can impact. If you're trying to, get dark money to pay an athlete, I like that there's a mechanism that federal government can say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing here? You're not in compliance. We're going to put the brakes on this. And that's a little bit of a change, a little bit of a shift. NIL right now is like the wild, wild west. It's, those waters have been tough to navigate. How athletes going to be paid, where they are now versus where they're going to be, in a few months, where they were before the agreement, where they are after the agreement, how's going to pay, who's going to pay, all of that. So an enforcement mechanism is in place. NCAA doesn't grant an antitrust exemption, which is what the NCAA wants, and over state NIL laws. Which is another thing to consider, how the states are going to deal with NIL laws. It doesn't clarify this will be big, who will enforce the NIL limits. And then, so that's going to bring about questions of oversight. Who, the how, the whens, the how much, all of that kind of stuff. And as I touched on earlier, the House versus NCAA settlement paves the way for schools to pay $2.8 billion in back pay to athletes. So that money, that deal, back athletes now must go through the clearinghouse to verify those deals. So I'm not sure how Trump's order is now going to collide with court challenges in motion and how things are currently being done. To me, clearinghouse is a little more than Congress. It's a slush fund with a potential for corruption. You know what's going to happen. There's going to be these clearinghouses are going to be susceptible to influence, to political and financial influence. I don't like it. Look, revenue sharing, generating revenue, it simply should just go to the universities as they see fit. And this is something I'm typically not for, but as they see fit, to develop their athletic departments, investing in the schools and the athletes' development to get them prepared to be better student athletes. And if they're on the professional path, preparing for that. That's where the money should go. Nobody should be getting paid, excuse me, like that, a CEO of Apple. So that's where we are currently. There'll probably be some legal entanglements coming up with NIL, and we'll probably be talking about this in the future and how it impacts Rutgers. I hope the Trump administration has some success in making college athletics more amateurism than professional athletes. We generally don't pay our professional athletes room, board, tuition, meals, travel. Have to pay all of that on their own. So I'm hoping we can get the cat's out of the bag, but if we can manage it to the point where athletes aren't getting paid from dark money and secret billionaires, and they can just take advantage of their name, image, and likeness by selling their jersey or a photograph or an autograph or whatever it might be. I'd be okay with that. Nonetheless, that's where we are heading into training camp. Hope we can stay healthy. There's going to be more stories picking up as we get to camp, and we wonder how the offensive line, Richie and Mike and Alex were talking about this yesterday on the night report. What are you going to watch? You're going to watch how the offensive line comes together. Tyler Needham, seems to be the guy that's leading a left tackle, but I don't love moving guys around on the offensive line because that potentially sets them up for injury or getting re-injured or having them play out of position. And I rather them, if they're going to be really good at a new position or dominant at an old one, I prefer being dominant at the old one. But we'll see. If Tyler does make the left tackle, Taj White at right, and we'll see how that all plays out. If Ethan is going to take the next step, offensive line has to be solid. So that's something I always watch year in and year out. And now we'll see how that goes. Defense, we kind of gashed in the run game last year. Hopefully, I think it was Alex said he'll be watching the defensive front six to see how well how the new guys do, and meshing with Jabomi is going to be a factor. But this has to be the year that Moses Walker, hopefully Moses, finally gets it together. We highly touted 4-star guy out of New York. We kept waiting to come around, and hopefully it comes together for him this year. So Alex will be watching the defensive front seven. Some of the things I'll be watching, front six, I should say. We play a 5-2, 5-2-4. I'm always going to watch the quarterback play, how comfortable they are in the pocket, decision-making, accuracy, and how well the offensive line plays. And I'm also really interested to see how the deep running back room, what that rotation is like. So we'll be watching some of that. And hopefully, we talked about Wydeek and his length. Special teams can get back to being, Greg Schiano's special teams, blocking punts, blocking kicks, and maybe Wydeek could be a force on the edge there. So enjoy the end of the summer and the beginning of camp and heading into the season. And hopefully we'll have something to talk about. I felt like a fish out of water the past month and a half or so, not having much to talk about. But nonetheless, everybody enjoy a fantastic week, and we will see you the next time.